Richard, I was always drawn to this place. Again, it was Tanalock, but I'd always felt at home here. And as a young child, I'd cycle over here and come into this place. I was a troubled child. Here I just felt sheltered. Ská chéile a bhar Nóirín. Then, of course, I had the great privilege of living here for 16 years on different houses around, and that was a great privilege.
Well, that might be a lovely one to begin with, Teaghlach.
Exactly, yeah, because we're here by the lake, you see, too. Yeah. And nobody really knows what it means, Richard. So it's like Meister Eckhart would say, that the God is unfathomable.
Yes.
And nobody has a name for that.
Right.
So like that, Tanalock then refers to the magic that comes from a lake.
Yeah.
That William Butler Yeats knew, of course, when he talks about the Lake Isle of Innisfree. Yeah. Yeah. And peace comes dropping slow. I hear it in the deep heart's core. And that's really what we're talking about, the healing of the lake, of the area, which is all about listening. Because you can't really describe it. It's ineffable, what we'd say, you know? And that it's really like, in the Irish tradition too, it's a dia ila loireach, that God is everywhere, but don't ask me to name it. But yet I feel it, and that somewhere like Glenstal exudes this spirit of place, you know, this Tanalock. And of course then people have, our friend John O'Donoghue was very strong on this, because this word is from the west of Ireland. And he used to call it an awareness, a certain awareness that you have when you're in a place, that something special happened here. And so he would talk about awareness, but also he said, it's not just awareness, Nóirín. I remember him saying to me one time, it's actually 7 degrees of awareness. You know.
Of a place. Yeah. And what does it mean, the word itself?
There are 2 translations of it. One is the tongue of the lake, Tanga Loch. And the other then is Anchana Loch, the old lake. But
so it's like the lake is speaking and you're listening.
The earth is speaking, exactly, if we can only hear it. And that's, of course, in the stillness that we hear these things, in the silence. We don't like being in silence. But when you come to a place like this Tach Íochta, this guest house, you have Tust, of course, is the word for silence. You're thrown into silence. The silence of listening, I hear it in the deep heart's core, you know, it's beautiful.
And is that listening to something in yourself or something in the earth, or both?
Both.
Both.
And it's becoming one. Is it Julian of Norwich and Teresa of Avila? They both said the same thing one time. He said, I become one in God and God becomes one in me. So I become one in Glenstal or any sacred site, and Glenstal becomes one in me. And that's the healing, when the healing occurs too, when you can become the place.
And is there a sense then that the divine and the sacred is in nature here? It's in the elements, and that you listen to?
Yeah.
What about walking in the woods,
yes,
near the forests?
There is a special way of walking that I think you have to do when you're here in Glenstal. And it is, I remember when I started learning the Irish language first with Micheál, and we were in Riain and talking to this man who had beautiful Irish. And I remember saying to him, is there a nice word for a special way of walking? I know we have shul, everybody knows that. And he said, yes. And here's a word that many people don't have. He said, Egspastoricht. Egspastoricht. And then I remember pushing him further and saying, what does Egspastoricht? What does it mean to you? And he said, like, it's kind of a sauntering. And then much later I found that that's a very beautiful word, Richard. It's from medieval French. And referred to these people who were idlers walking around looking for money to go to La Sainte Terre, to the Holy Land, and that's what they would say. And so, but there was something special. And Song Tair, of course, without no, you have no home.
No particular home, but the earth belongs to you, so to
That's
speak.
right. Yeah.
But you don't possess any part of it.
Exactly.
And what about the Mass Rock here in Glenstal? Is that a special place for you?
Oh, yeah. Every Mass Rock, there are about 500 of them in Ireland. I'm quite schizophrenic when it comes to that Mass Rock, because you know, of course, it was built on a sacred space itself, a very ancient sacred space, off down there in the middle of this Ice Age valley that so few people have walked on. And then, but of course the Mass Rock goes back to the penal times, Carrick on Afrin. And in fact there's a beautiful little song, I'll give you a tiny little bit of it, one song that's associated with it, because of course it was a place where people gathered together to worship when they couldn't, Roman Catholics, when they couldn't. And then they'd be looking out for the peelers up here, as you can see down here in this Mass Rock, which is a perfect example of it, because you have, it's surrounded, it's down in a little valley, and you would have people looking out for the peelers, and if they came, so we'll say the priest would have something like this as a little cross.
Right.
And so the minute the peelers would come, he could cast it away. But this is the whole other way. Yeah, so it's a healing place because it's also very sad down there. You can almost hear people singing, as this little song kind of exemplifies too, because it is you're giving a secret message. Have you seen my love? And that's the Eucharist of Valentine. And if you say, yes, I have, it means that Mass is going to be there soon. And if you haven't, I left to Egan Garrig, no ever to fame Mahro, no ever to Gila, agus Finna, agus Scare from law, no ever to Antul, Bahura is Bavil Shablo. No ever to my Valentine, no will she hotly more toil.
Beautiful.
Isn't it?
Lovely.
Very unusual time.
Yeah.
But it's very old.
Yeah. Tell me, there was a little phrase you mentioned to me earlier about, what was it? A phrase in Irish?
Fáilte, Riv Turin the Chus.
Yeah, okay, so say that again now. Yeah.
Fáilte, welcome. Riv Turin the Chus. The sound of your foot. Ní Avon to Hain. And I find this a very moving shout-out actually, because it is that the sound of your foot is more welcome than yourself. And you know, when we're expecting somebody and you hear them coming and arriving to your door, that can be much more, you know, moving than it always brings me back to the visitation actually of Mary to Elizabeth. I can imagine the sound of her foot, Mary's foot, coming with a child, bearing a child, and then to the other pregnant woman. And that welcome there, which was so healing.
And it's like what you were saying the other day about the word for hope is tosulagam, right? That you're waiting to see something that comes.
That's the verb, you see. Whereas dochas is the actual word, is our noun for hope, if you're talking about hope. But I hope is tosuil agam, which is I have an eye out for you, a special eye, the third eye, you know. So
you're watching out for something and you're waiting to hear something, the sound of the footprint on the earth. I mean, it's a very earthy thing.
You know, Richard, as you know, the ear is the sense of hospitality, because it's always awaiting things and taking in the outer world through the ear, you know. So it's a very special sense of hospitality.
And isn't it important to, at this time of ecological crisis and indeed pandemic crisis, to learn to listen again to the earth?
Yeah. I mean, as we know, the COVID has been as much a spiritual crisis as a physical crisis, and that we're going back now to actually bringing us together too in community as well, in a new sense, in a new way, you know. And then I think always too of the word for hospitality in Irish, which is flachulacht, And every time I say that word, flahuireacht, I'm thinking of flachas, which is the word for heaven. So that you are, you know, when you enter into a spirit of hospitality, which of course we all should. Hebrews has that too in the book of Hebrews. Do not forget to be hospitable to a stranger. So when we're entering into that flahuireacht, Hamid Arnev, Hamid Insnaflahish, you know. So,
But it's heaven on earth,
right.
implicit,
Absolutely.
waiting for us,
Yeah.
calling to us.
It's our way to be heavenly bodies and heavenly beings. I've had the great privilege of living here for 16 years. But then it just suddenly meant it was time to move on.
Yeah.
But having moved on, I've still taken it in my heart. And I'm living on the edge, Immel. That's the name of my little house, which is called The Edge. And so I still take it because, of course, after that experience of being in the midst of these holy people, that something sort of rubbed off, all right. But then, as the writer Nóirín, I love that little phrase that she has, a time came when the risk to stay within the bud was more painful than the risk to blossom.
Beautiful.
Dien geheire, dien du